Hey, what's up guys? It's Joe from PWC Muscle, and today we're going to be installing a cold air intake as well as a ribbon delete for our GP 1800 project ski. The first step of our installation, like many of our other installations, is going to be disconnecting the battery. Next we'll remove the engine cover. This will give us a little bit of additional room while installing the air intake, but it is mandatory for installing the ribbon delete. Disconnect the breather hose from the supercharger inlet hose. Then loosen the hose clamps and remove the hose that goes from the stock air intake to the supercharger. Now we're going to disconnect all the clips that are holding the air box together. There's 8 of these clips total. Once they're all removed, you can remove the front of the air inbox, and the filter will be attached on the inside as well. We can just remove this from the hull. With the front removed, you can see there's 2 bolts here. There's also 2 more on the other side that I can't quite show. Remove those 4 bolts that are holding the rest of the element in place. With the last bolt removed, the rest of the air box comes out easily. You can see that there's 4 bolts holding the remainder of the bracket for the airbox in place. You can remove those 4 bolts just to get the bracket out of the way. Alright, now that we've removed our stock intake system, we're going to start with the ribbon delete modification. If you're not going to install that right now, then you can skip ahead to this time right here, and we'll continue with the air intake from that point. Otherwise, it's just a few more parts to remove, including the intake manifold, which isn't as bad as it sounds, in order to install the next modification. So the first step is going to be removing the air tube that goes from the throttle body to the intercooler here. It's a really tight fit, so it's going to be difficult to show you, but basically using a shorty flathead screwdriver here, you're going to loosen the hose clamps and then pull it out. See how this turns out as I go down here. Alright, well there's one of the hose clamps that's for the throttle body, and we're going to be loosening that bolt, and then over here, here's the other one. Can't quite see it from this angle, but it's going to be that hose clamp. Alright, now you can see we have our hose in here disconnected. Really is a pretty tight fit. With that hose removed, you can see that there's a bolt right here that's holding the manifold into place, part of the bracket. See if I can get it on this side as well. You'll have to remove those 2 bolts before proceeding. So to make some additional room for ourselves, we're going to want to disconnect this wiring harness, which it's going to have a couple connectors over here, obviously on the coil packs, the fuel injectors. There's a few zip ties, just a couple of things just to get it up and out of the way, and that'll give us a lot more room to work on everything, as well as allow the intake manifold to come free later on. So just start with disconnecting and then snipping the zip ties that you feel holding in place. I would suggest working from the front backwards, and if there's something that's tying it up, start there and then start snipping zip ties until you get the whole thing free. There is one wire that I left attached to the valve cover here, and that it has enough slack that it won't be in your way. All right, I removed the bracket nuts, even though you can't see them. The next part is going to be removing these cap nuts that are on each side, and then there are 6 total mounting bolts. To create a little bit more room, we disconnect the cable holder from the actual throttle body, and that just makes it so that we can put the whole attachment up on top. With the intake manifold just sitting on top of the valve cover here, you can see the way that our throttle body is bolted in, and it's going to be these 4 bolts that we remove next. Alright, and this is the screen that we'll be removing. Remove the Allen key bolts in order to get the spacer off. Alright, now we need to just remove our ribbon, which takes you have to pull on the seal
Do so, try not to rip it, but it'll slide out after working it for a little bit. Okay, and now with it out, you can see just how much space it's removing. I mean, this thing is really, really dense. With our new Riva plate, it'll open it up. So what we're going to do is remove the rubber liner from the ribbon and reinstall it onto our Riva ring. Okay, now it just goes right back into place as it was before. You definitely want to make sure you install one of these though in order to give you clear flow, because you can see from this lip that that'll really disturb the airflow as opposed to the way it is here. So now we're going to reinstall our throttle body plate and then reinstall the throttle body on here, and then everything's basically done in reverse. Put the throttle body back onto the intake manifold, and then the bolts are here, are secured with red thread locker. Now we're going to reconnect the cable holder back to the throttle body and start putting it back in place and reattaching our cable. So you can see I actually have the fuel rail removed here. This is really just for illustrative purposes, so you can see some of the bolts better, and so that when I remove it, or remove the intake manifold, you can see what we're working on a little bit more clearly. You don't have to remove the fuel rail. It's only a couple of bolts to get it off though, and it does make things just a little bit easier when you're working with it inside of here, but it isn't something that's required. Okay, with the intake manifold back in place, we'll start installing our caps and bolts in order to resecure the intake manifold to the head. Alright, we have all of our bolts loosely in place. We can now start to torque them down. The torquing order is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they all get torqued down to 20 Newton meters. Since all of our wires are still out of the way, now is a better opportunity to reinstall our hose that goes from the throttle body to the intercooler. Not going to be able to really show this being installed just because of the angle, but that'll be the next step. Next step is going to be reconnecting our wiring harness. Main thing to remember here is don't forget these two connectors. We have to screw this back into the intake manifold, and then to your zip tie points. Make sure that it's secure if you can't find all the exact points. It's gonna do this without showing every single step because it's pretty straightforward. Now we reinstall our brackets for the engine cover. Now we're gonna install the supplied billet clamp over the front of the supercharger inlet, and remember to make sure that the lip is facing towards the supercharger, and then there's a provided Allen key in order to clamp down those bolts. Now we can thread our flange on top of the clamp, being careful not to over tighten, just needs to be snug. Our next step is going to be installing the bracket, and it will install on the bolt that's on the underside of here. We can see that's one of the mounting points for our glove box. And what we'll do is unscrew that bolt and then install the bracket and reinstall with the same nut. Okay, our next step is easier to perform by installing the mount onto our intake before putting the intake inside the hull. We've already pre-installed our coupler and our air filter here. So now what we do is we just simply thread on our bushing. Okay, and then pre-mount our bracket with the supplied bolt. So all screwed into place, and it's ready to be installed inside the hull. Alright, we sprayed a little bit of window cleaner on the inside of the coupler just to make it slide on more easily to the front. With it on, get it adjusted in position. I'm going to have to use two hands so I won't be able to get on video. Then tighten up the hose clamps, making sure not to over tighten. Looking into the hull here, we can see that's where our bracket needs to line up to. So we just move it over and into position. Now all we have to do is install our nut. In order to hook up the breather tube, we have to use this adapter that Riva provides us with. Very simply, you just put a zip tie on here to keep it in place, and then reattach the breather hose to the end with the clamp. last steps, we are going to put the engine cover back on top, reconnect our battery, and that'll be it for our installation. Okay, that finishes our installation. You can see I'm wearing a different shirts because actually we did this over a course of 2 days. It takes a little bit of time when you're trying to set up the shop and do the installation as well. But I'm definitely looking forward to getting this one on the water. You can see just how restrictive this ribbon is, and getting rid of it, I'm sure, is going to really free up the airflow on this Yamaha. Also, big thank you to Yamaha Motors for making this build series possible. Weather's been holding out for us pretty well here in Florida, so we look forward to getting this out and doing some testing. As always, you can find our results on pwcextreme.com. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter for continual updates as we continue with building out our GP 1800. Thanks again for watching. As always, ride fast, ride safe, and we'll see you on the water.